My fiancée mocked my dead mother at the rehearsal dinner. Her family said she didn't mean it. I replied, okay. Then I canceled the wedding. Now, she was suddenly deeply sorry and wants to reconcile. I, 32 never thought I'd be the guy who cancels his wedding 48 hours before the ceremony. But life has a twisted sense of humor. The venue was booked, the flowers were ordered, 200 guests had their plane tickets, and the cake, a ridiculous 4-tier monstrosity that cost more than my first car, was sitting in some bakery's refrigerator. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be intimate. Just close family and the wedding party at this upscale Italian restaurant my fiancée had insisted on. I should have known something was off when she'd had 3 glasses of wine before the appetizers even arrived. She got chatty when she drank, but that night there was an edge to her voice I hadn't heard before. My mother died when I was 19. Cancer. It was brutal and slow, and I watched her waste away over 8 months. She was a school teacher, the kind who spent her own money on supplies for kids whose parents couldn't afford them. She was kind. She was selfless. And even though it's been 13 years, I still think about her every single day. My fiancée knew all of this. We'd been together for 3 years. She'd seen me break down on the anniversary of my mother's death. She'd held my hand at the cemetery. Or at least I thought she understood what it meant to me. The dinner was going fine until someone, I think it was my aunt, brought up the traditional mother-son dance, and how sad it was that my mom wouldn't be there. The table got quiet in that uncomfortable way people do when death gets mentioned. I gave some practiced response about how I'd be dancing with my aunt instead, that my mother would have wanted me to be happy, the usual lines you develop after years of fielding condolences. That's when my fiancée laughed. Not a polite chuckle or a nervous giggle. A full, wine-soaked laugh that cut through the silence like a knife. She said it was probably for the best that my mother wasn't there, because from what she'd heard, my mother had terrible taste and would have probably shown up in something embarrassing. She said she was glad she didn't have to deal with a tacky mother-in-law trying to control the wedding. Then she did this exaggerated impression, putting on this whiny voice, pretending to be my dead mother criticizing her dress choices. The table went silent. I mean the kind of silence where you can hear the kitchen staff clattering dishes 2 rooms away. My hands were shaking. I looked around at my family. My aunt had tears in her eyes. My father had gone completely pale. My younger brother looked like he wanted to flip the table over. Then I looked at her family. Her mother was staring down at her plate. Her father was clearing his throat uncomfortably. Her sister was checking her phone like nothing had happened. And my fiancée? She was still smiling, oblivious, or indifferent. I couldn't tell which. I asked her what she just said. I needed her to repeat it, to give her a chance to take it back, to say she misspoke. She waved her hand dismissively and told me to relax, that it was just a joke. She said I was always so sensitive about my mother, and she was just trying to lighten the mood. Her father jumped in then, doing damage control. He said she didn't mean anything by it, that she'd had too much wine, that weddings make everyone stressed and say things they don't mean. Her mother nodded vigorously, saying they should just move past this and enjoy the evening. Her sister finally looked up from her phone long enough to tell me I was overreacting. I sat there for what felt like an hour, but was probably 30 seconds. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for me to smooth it over, to be the bigger person, to let it slide because the wedding was in 2 days, and we'd already spent $40,000, and canceling now would be insane. I said okay, just that one word. Okay. Then I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out. My brother followed me, asking what I was going to do. I told him I was going home. He asked if I meant my apartment or if I was planning something else. I didn't answer because I didn't know yet. I drove for 2 hours that night, windows down, music off, just the sound of the highway and my own thoughts. I pulled into a rest stop somewhere past midnight and sat in my car watching 18-wheelers roll past. That's when I made the decision. I called the venue first. The woman who answered was confused. It was 1 a.m, but when I told her I needed to cancel the wedding, she got very professional very quickly. Cancellation fees, deposits, all of that. I told her to charge whatever she needed to charge. Then I called the caterer, then the florist, then the band. By 4 a.m, I dismantled an entire wedding. The hardest call was to my father. I woke him up, apologized, and told him what happened. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said my mother would be proud of me. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't sleep. At 8 a.m, I sent a mass email to every guest with a simple message. The wedding was canceled due to irreconcilable differences, and I apologized for any inconvenience. I didn't explain further. I didn't need to. By noon, my phone was exploding. Her family called first. Her father wanted to talk it through like reasonable adults. I told him there was nothing to talk through. Her mother cried and said I was throwing away a beautiful relationship over a misunderstanding. I reminded her that mocking a dead woman wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a choice. Her sister called me immature and said I was ruining her sister's life over a stupid comment. My fiancée herself didn't call until almost 3 in the afternoon. She was crying, hysterical, asking what I'd done. She said I'd humiliated her in front of everyone, that I was being vindictive and cruel. I asked her if she remembered what she said about my mother. She went quiet. Then she said she was drunk, that she didn't mean it, that everyone says stupid things when they're drunk. I told her that drunk words are sober thoughts. She started yelling then, saying I was punishing her for one mistake, that 3 years together should count for something. I agreed that 3 years did count for something. It counted as 3 years where she'd successfully hidden who she really was. Then I hung up. The next few days were a blur. Friends reached out, divided pretty evenly between people who supported my decision and people who thought I'd overreacted. The ones who thought I overreacted all said the same thing. She apologized. People make mistakes. Cold feet makes people act crazy. Marriage is about forgiveness. But here's the thing they didn't understand. She didn't apologize at the table. She doubled down. She told me to relax. And her family's immediate instinct wasn't to check her behavior. It was to make excuses for her and pressure me to let it go. That told me everything I needed to know about what my life would look like if I married into that family. I moved out of our shared apartment while she was at her parents' house. Took only what was mine, left her stuff untouched, and forwarded my half of the rent for the remaining 2 months on the lease. Clean break. I blocked her number, blocked her family, blocked her friends who kept trying to mediate. For 3 months, I heard nothing. I threw myself into work, started going to therapy, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the relationship. My therapist said I was processing grief, not just from the relationship ending, but from years of unresolved grief about my mother that this incident had ripped back open. She wasn't wrong. Then, last week, my fiancée showed up at my new apartment. I have no idea how she got my address, probably from a mutual friend who didn't know better. She looked rough. Hair pulled back, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She asked if we could talk. I told her through the door that we had nothing to talk about. She started crying, saying she'd been in therapy, that she'd realized how horrible she'd been, that she was deeply sorry for what she'd said. She said she didn't expect me to take her back, but she needed me to know that she understood now how much she'd hurt me. I opened the door, not to let her in, but so she could see my face when I responded. I told her I believed that she was sorry. Sorry that there were consequences. Sorry that her actions had blown up her life. Sorry that people judged her when the story got around. But I didn't believe she was sorry for what she actually said about my mother. She insisted she was, that she'd been awful and cruel, and she'd spent 3 months thinking about what she'd done. I asked her a simple question. If I hadn't canceled the wedding, if I'd swallowed my anger and married her anyway, would she have ever apologized? Would she have ever even thought what she said was wrong? She couldn't answer. She opened her mouth a few times, but nothing came out. That silence was the answer. I told her that her mask had slipped that night. For one drunken moment, she'd let me see what she really thought. Maybe she looked down on my family. Maybe she resented my mother's memory because I held it sacred. Maybe she was just cruel when she drank. I didn't know and didn't care anymore. But I knew I couldn't marry someone who could say those things about the woman who raised me. She tried a few more tactics. She said her family had been wrong to make excuses for her, that she'd cut them off for not holding her accountable. I didn't believe that for a second. She said she'd do anything to make it right, go to couples counseling, have a smaller wedding, let me plan everything. I told her there was nothing to make right, because we were done the moment those words left her mouth. Then she got angry. The tears dried up fast, and she asked if I was really going to throw away everything we had over one bad night. She said I was holding her to an impossible standard, that everyone makes mistakes, that I was being self-righteous and unforgiving. She said my mother wouldn't want me to be this bitter. That's when I lost my composure. I told her she didn't get to invoke my mother ever again. She'd lost that privilege when she mocked her at a table full of people who loved her. I told her to leave and never contact me again, or I'd file for a restraining order. She left. I watched her car pull away from my window and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, just emptiness. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since she showed up at my apartment, and the fallout has been something else entirely. I thought blocking her would be the end of it. I was wrong. Her family started a full-scale campaign to get me to reconsider. Her father sent me a long email about forgiveness and how his daughter had made a terrible mistake but deserved a second chance. He brought up my mother again, saying she would want me to be merciful. I didn't respond, but I forwarded the email to my father. He called her father directly and told him if anyone in their family contacted me again, we'd pursue legal action for harassment. That stopped the parents. But her friends were relentless. 3 different people reached out claiming they were neutral parties who just wanted to help us communicate. Every single one of them had the same script. She's really changed. She's getting help. You two were so good together. I asked one of them point blank if my fiancée had told them exactly what she said about my mother. The friend went silent, then admitted she'd only heard there was an argument about family stuff. I told her the full story. She never contacted me again. The worst part was running into mutual friends. We'd built a whole social circle together, and I knew I'd lose some of them in the split. What I didn't expect was how many people would treat me like the villain. At a birthday party for a college friend, someone cornered me and said I'd been cruel to cancel the wedding so close to the date. When I explained what she'd said, they responded that people say terrible things when they're stressed and drunk. I left the party early. My brother has been my rock through all of this. He told me that half the family wanted to confront her at the rehearsal dinner but held back because they didn't want to make a scene at what was supposed to be my celebration. My aunt told me privately that she'd never seen someone so casually cruel, and she was relieved I hadn't married into that family. Work became my escape. I took on extra projects, volunteered for assignments no one else wanted. My boss noticed and pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay. I gave him the abbreviated version. He just nodded and said his own father had walked away from an engagement in the 70s for similar reasons, and it was the best decision he ever made. Somehow that helped more than any advice from friends. The real surprise came from my father. He's not an emotional man, never has been. But one night he drove 2 hours to my apartment, knocked on my door, and just hugged me. Didn't say anything for a full minute, just held on. Then he told me that my mother had always worried about me finding someone who would truly value me, who wouldn't try to diminish me or the people I loved. He said she'd be relieved I walked away from someone who failed that test so spectacularly. We sat up talking until 3 in the morning. He told me stories about my mother I'd never heard, including one about how she'd ended a friendship in college because the friend had made a cruel joke about his stutter. He'd forgotten he even used to stutter until my mother pointed out that the friend's mockery wasn't harmless. It was revealing. My mother had zero tolerance for cruelty disguised as humor. I realized then that walking away wasn't just about protecting my mother's memory. It was about honoring the values she'd taught me. That kindness matters, that words have weight, and that you shouldn't tolerate disrespect from anyone, especially someone who claims to love you. Update 2. A month has passed since the last update, and I thought the drama was finally dying down. I was wrong again. My ex-fiancée created a burner Instagram account and sent me a message. She said she wasn't trying to violate my boundaries, but needed closure. She asked if there was anything she could do to prove she'd changed. I screenshot the message, blocked the account, and sent the screenshot to my lawyer. He sent her a formal cease and desist letter. That finally seemed to work. But then her sister showed up at my gym. I didn't notice her at first. I was on the treadmill with headphones in. When I finished and went to grab my water bottle, she was standing there. She said we needed to talk about what I'd done to her sister. I told her I wasn't interested and tried to walk past her. She followed me, raising her voice, saying I'd destroyed her sister's mental health, that she'd been in and out of therapy, that I owed her an explanation beyond just walking away. People were starting to stare. I stopped, took out my headphones, and asked her loudly enough for nearby people to hear if she wanted me to explain exactly what her sister had said about my dead mother at the rehearsal dinner. Her face went pale. I didn't wait for an answer. I told her that her sister had mocked a woman who couldn't defend herself, that her family had made excuses for it, and that I'd made the right choice walking away. Then I told her if she ever approached me again, I'd file a police report for harassment. She left quickly after that. I reported the incident to gym management anyway. They pulled security footage and banned her from the property. The therapy I'd started has been helping more than I expected. My therapist pointed out that I'd been in survival mode for months, canceling the wedding, moving apartments, dealing with the constant pressure to reconcile. She said I needed to actually process what happened, not just react to it. In one session, she asked me what I'd lost when the relationship ended. I started listing the obvious things: the partnership, the future we'd planned, the social circle. Then she asked what I'd gained. That question broke something open. I'd gained self-respect. I'd gained the knowledge that I could stand up for myself and the people I love, even when it cost me everything. I'd gained clarity about what I would and wouldn't tolerate in a relationship. And weirdly, I'd gained a closer relationship with my family, who'd all rallied around me in ways I didn't expect. My younger brother told me something that stuck with me. He said he'd always thought I was too accommodating in relationships, too quick to smooth things over and avoid conflict. Watching me walk away from the wedding showed him that I had a backbone after all. He said he was proud of me. Coming from him, that meant everything. I've started dating again, nothing serious. But I'm different now. I'm clearer about my boundaries, quicker to speak up when something bothers me, less willing to ignore red flags for the sake of keeping the peace. The old me would have married her, spent years in a miserable marriage, and probably ended up divorced anyway. This version of me walked away before legally binding myself to someone who could be that cruel. Last week, I visited my mother's grave for the first time since the rehearsal dinner. I hadn't been able to go. Every time I thought about it, I remembered my ex-fiancée's mocking voice and felt sick. But I finally went, brought fresh flowers, and sat there for an hour. I told my mom everything. About the rehearsal dinner, about canceling the wedding, about the harassment from my ex's family, about the people who thought I'd overreacted. And I told her I was okay, that I protected her memory and protected myself, that I hoped she was proud. The wind picked up while I was sitting there, and I know it's probably just wishful thinking, but it felt like an answer. Like she was telling me I'd done the right thing. I'm not completely healed. I still have moments where I question everything, where I wonder if I should have handled it differently. But those moments are getting rarer. Mostly, I just feel relieved. Relieved that I saw who she really was before signing a marriage certificate. Relieved that I trusted my instincts instead of letting other people pressure me into forgiveness I didn't feel. Someone recently asked me if I regret the 3 years I spent with her. Honestly, no. Those 3 years taught me what I don't want. They taught me that love isn't enough if it isn't accompanied by respect and basic human decency. And they taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away. I don't know what my ex-fiancée is doing now, and I don't care to find out. That chapter is closed. I'm just focused on building something better, something that would make my mother proud. And for the first time in months, I actually believe I will.